Tory Prentice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling me early in this debate, and I should start by apologising that I have an unbreakable commitment elsewhere and I will have to go. Quite frankly, this is the debate I dread most during the year, but it's also one that I am determined to be part of. It is a great honour to follow both honourable members who've spoken so far, and indeed to speak in a debate which marks the beginning of Baby Loss Awareness Week, and indeed to act as Vice Chair of the merry band, largely, of people who form the all-party parliamentary group. We have been brought together by horrific circumstances, but we have had extraordinary success. There are hundreds, perhaps even 1,000, I think, all-party parliamentary groups, but quite frankly, very few can boast the success that we've had in the last 3 years. We've really put baby loss on the agenda and changed the law, for example, on parental bereavement leave. I gesticulate at my honourable friend, the member for Thurston Moulton, who has joined with us so enthusiastically to champion this area. We would not be where we are today were it not for the support we've had from the government, particularly the ministers in the Department of Health and Social Care, and indeed for the hard work of the charities who work with us. 2018 is particularly special for SANS, who are celebrating their 40th anniversary this year. I'm so proud of my constituent, Karen Hancox, who's worked so hard for SANS in Oxfordshire after losing her first daughter, Kayleigh, in 2008. She was responsible for lighting up Banbury Cross in memory of Baby Loss Awareness Week last year, and she also helped with the fantastically helpful service in St Mary's, Banbury, last year, which we are repeating this Sunday, and which I hope any honourable member passing on the M40 will join us at. Of course.
Thank the honourable lady for giving way. Now, I want to take this opportunity, this interjection, to congratulate our honourable friend who's been tirelessly campaigning for many years now. I've listened to these debates before, and they're very difficult for everybody concerned, even although you've got no experience of that. But looking back, I can remember the issues about cot deaths when women were charged and accused of maybe harming their babies. But there's also the problem, a fairly recent problem, and I think there's some prosecutions going on, or investigations going on, where parents have lost a child at birth, but they still don't know the reason for it. So once again, can I congratulate the honourable lady for her tireless work in that area.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and if I may, on behalf of the honourable member for Edinburgh, thank him for his kind words. Going back to the issue of inquests and stillbirths, which the honourable lady mentioned earlier, I've been leading on that area in the APPG because of my previous legal background, and indeed the fact that I spent much of my legal life conducting inquests on behalf of the government. There is a private member's bill going on about that issue at the moment. It is a very broad private member's bill. The member in charge likes to refer to it as the hatched, matched and dispatched bill, which gives some idea of its scope. This is an extremely difficult and sensitive area, both legally and in terms of the messaging. Many interest groups are concerned that it touches on the law about abortions, it touches on the law about when babies become beings and part of society. There is no need for much of that debate. It doesn't, in fact, need to touch on many of those terribly difficult issues, and we in the all-party group are working hard to try to ensure that that doesn't happen, and that we are able, in the very small number of cases where an inquest will be helpful, because I know from my own experience that inquests are very hard for families. But in the small number of cases where extra transparency is needed, we are working very hard with the Department and with the Department of Justice, who are very involved in this, to try and push that issue forward. The Scots are also working in this area, and give us time. Next year we may have some announcements, I hope. Anyway, sorry, to go back to SANS and the brilliant work of my constituent, Karen. She is one of the 40 SANS volunteers to be nominated as part of the charity's anniversary celebrations, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming her to Westminster later this week at our parliamentary reception. I'm also very much looking forward to the service that we're having in St Mary's Undercroft on Thursday, and I would encourage anybody that works in this House, whether as a member or a peer or any of our staff, to come to that service. It is extremely warm, friendly. Everybody may weep throughout, but in a positive way. I must also praise the BBC. Wow, 2 Conservative MPs praised the BBC in successive speeches for highlighting our Awareness Week. The slot on the Chris Evans show this morning meant that I had to stop the car. It was about the amazing bereavement midwife, Nicola Taylor, and the couple she helped around the birth of their 3 babies, and it was incredibly powerful. Fiona Crack's story, currently on the BBC website. If you wander off in concentrating during this debate, please, I encourage you to look at that, or perhaps better when you get home tonight. Women's Hour is also handling this issue extremely sensitively and well. I'd like to touch on 3 points, if I may, this evening. Firstly, the bereavement care pathway. As my honourable friend said, it's a real success. I received some brilliant care, but some less good care when our baby died 18 years ago. What is so critical with the National Bereavement Care Pathway is that it embeds the standards across trusts, across the nation, as a matter of course, and it's really important that we do that. The situation at the moment is still patchy. According to SANS, only 46% of trusts with maternity units provide mandatory bereavement care training for maternity unit staff. Of these, 86% provide their staff with just 1 hour or less training on bereavement care each year. I think, well, of course it's right that we focus on families. It's also true that we should think a little bit about midwives and obstetricians who themselves are very affected by the death of a baby in their care. They often build up an enduring relationship with families, and I think their health and their future ability to function must be considered when we think about what training they receive. I'd like you to, for a minute, to focus on neonatal units, Madam Deputy Speaker. Really stressful places. Anybody with a child on a neonatal unit is not a happy parent. It's not the place you want to be. 41% of our neonatal units have no access, patients on them have no access to a trained mental health worker. And many neonatal units still do not have dedicated bereavement facilities. I know that the government has funded better bereavement places in nearly 40 hospitals, but this is only the beginning. Prioritising the pathway within the new NHS long-term plan would make a real difference. Planning 1 year ahead is not really good enough. We know that despite our best efforts to reduce neonatal death and stillbirth, bereavements will continue to occur. So we need to plan for this. I really hope that the Minister will have good news for us today. My honourable friend for Edinburgh described the government as passing the exam with flying colours. I agree, and I'm very grateful for what the government's done, but if they want to be an A-star pupil, I would say that further work was needed in this area so that this just becomes the norm. My second point is that better training is only possible if we have enough midwives. I hosted the launch of the Royal College of Midwives' State of Maternity Services report recently, which found that finally more midwives are entering training. When I hosted it last year, we were very concerned by the ageing nature of the profession. Well, we're all getting older. They can't help that. But I'm pleased to say that we now have more than 2,100 more full-time equivalent midwives in the NHS than we did in 2010. The vast majority are in their 20s and 30s. It's also important that we focus on retaining these midwives and indeed persuading former midwives back to work. This is progress in the right direction, but the situation does remain critical. I really do wake in the night worrying about labouring mothers in North Oxfordshire, in my constituency, going to the Horton General Hospital to give birth, only to be told that the unit's closed because the midwife who staffs it has been sent to cover gaps at the John Radcliffe. This has been the case on at least 3 separate occasions in recent weeks. Please, if you know of anybody who's thinking of becoming a midwife, encourage them to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd encourage, it's a brilliant profession. It's important that the department continues to encourage the training and retention of the midwives we need. Finally, if I may touch on perinatal mental health. On the eve of World Mental Health Day, it seems appropriate that we focus on the mental health of mothers and fathers. Pregnancy presents the health service with a brilliant opportunity to engage with people becoming parents and to give them life lessons which will improve health choices for them and for their children. Their mental health is clearly as important as their physical health. We know that those who've had difficult pregnancies or have lost children will understandably struggle with subsequent births. We need to identify families at risk and pour resource in before it's needed. These families may not fit into the usual definitions of postnatal care. The definition and structure of care in the 6-week postnatal period has changed very little in the last 150 years, though during this time there's been dramatic changes in women's health and our attitude to birth and indeed outcomes of birth. It's critical that contraception, for example, is also discussed and is really easily available during this time. Waiting months to have a long-acting contraceptive fitted is not helpful to new mothers. This is important. It might seem ridiculous to bring contraception up in a debate on baby loss, but it is important. When you look at the maternal mortality stats, some of those women who are dying during giving birth should not have been pregnant in the first place. It is critical that we deal with contraception early where that's appropriate and that we give people choices, real choices to get contraception that works for them straight after they've given birth. We in the All-Party Parliamentary Group will continue to say the unsayable on issues like baby ashes or the appropriateness or otherwise of inquests. These are dark areas for any society to deal with, but I think this APPG has been a force for good. I'm really proud to play my part in breaking the silence.
Yeah.